Oh there! Welcome back to the Reformed Corner. Today I wanted to do a live reaction to the debate that just happened between Trent Doherty and Cleave to Antiquity and a couple other guys. Not heard much from the other guys before, but I've seen a couple of Cleave to Antiquity's things. I think his debate with Cameron Reichner, whatever his name is, the Catholic guy, about Sola Scriptura and the canon was really great. He did a really great job. That was the first time I'd seen him, and so I've been keeping up with some of his stuff, and he's doing a bang up job. And so apparently in this debate there's a big crash out with Trent, which apparently happened last time. Also in his debate with Jay Dyer, so seems like he's not having a good time right now. But let's give it a go. Let's watch it for ourselves. All right, let me put that on the screen here. All right.
All right, God bless you all. Are we live right now? I think we're live. Let me double check it. All right. Sometimes it says it's live and it's not actually live. StreamYard tends to have that issue, man. But okay, but we're live. I just saw it on the YouTube website. All right, so we're live. So the rules are going to be very basic and very simple here. You have brother Ben, we have Danny, we have Trent. The conversation is, do Muslims worship the same God of the Bible? That's going to be the topic here today. Danny, Trent believe that is the case. Ben and I believe that is not the case. We're going to go really briefly into what we believe, and then right away we're just going to start talking about this because I know Trent and a couple of other brothers are, pressed for time. And then after this show, Danny and I are going to do an after show where you guys can come and talk to us directly. So with that said, Danny, go ahead. Just if you want, just a couple of minutes, and we'll keep it pushing from there. So go ahead.
Right. So I actually think that atheists sort of believe that if God exists, that Muslims and Jews and Christians are talking about the same thing. It's actually kind of rare that atheists would even utter, oh yeah, those three religions, they worship different gods, right? Most atheists would probably say they worship the same God, they just have a different take on that kind of being, right? When I'm an ex-Christian, when I encountered Muslims, right, when they said, may God bless.
Right. So I don't know too much about this Danny kid. Says he's an ex-Christian, means he's an atheist now. Probably came from some kind of non-denominational evangelical background. It's pretty common. I'd be surprised if that's not the case, but I mean, if it's not, it's not the case. I'm not terribly curious about what caused his deconversion. Probably just some of the similar kinds of things I've been talking about for a while now.
Right? I thought they were talking about the same thing as me, although I thought their description of God was totally inaccurate, right? Also, as an atheist, I believe that Jesus exists. You believe, as I think the rest of the other three here believe that Jesus exists, but I don't think Jesus is God, right? I think Jesus is a finite being. He died and is no longer exists, right? Does that suddenly mean that we're talking about two different beings, right? No, I think a lot of people need to understand that Trent and I's position is that just because there are two different descriptions of one thing doesn't mean that we're talking about two different things, or even if those descriptions are mutually exclusive, right? So this is presumably not a debate where I'm defending an exclusive Catholic position. My view is that whether you're Catholic, whether you're a Muslim, whether you're an atheist, agnostic, I think you ought to believe that Muslims, Christians, and Jews all worship or refer to the same being.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Danny.
I see that's a problem because Jesus is the God-man, right? So he's denying the divine nature of Christ. He's denying that he is the second person of the Trinity. So yes, you can make the argument that we're talking about the same being. We're not, but you are saying that Jesus is not a person in the Godhead. That's more than just a descriptive thing. That cuts into the very ontological argument that we're talking about here.
Go ahead, Cleave. So what do we believe?
Sure. So I mean, we would hold that Muslims and Christians do not worship the same God, since if you reject the Trinity, who is my God, then you do not have the same God as me. If you reject Jesus Christ as divine, as being God himself, then you do not worship the same God as me. We could be referring to the same historical person, but if you reject his divinity, then by its very nature, you're not worshiping the same God as me. I would argue the same thing for anybody who willfully rejects the Trinity or Jesus Christ's divinity. So that's the basic position there.
Pretty cool.
All right, so now we're here. So do you guys want to ask us a question, or how are we going to bowl this out? Because we're winging it here. This is informal. You know what I'm saying? No moderators.
You guys, Danny and Ben kept it admirably brief. I've got my little lap counter to make sure that I don't talk too long on anything and that I keep it proportional. So I think that there's just some real confusions about the nature of language and worship. And so I think that, the idea that one word that you said in there, Ben, was therefore. And I don't necessarily disagree with, everything you said. I just disagree with the kind of like the therefore part. Paul, for example. So the difference was, if somebody doesn't believe that God is triune, they're worshiping a different God or referring to a different God. They're not naming the same God. And that just doesn't follow. It doesn't follow philosophically. It doesn't follow linguistically, biblically, or anything. So I just wonder what you think about Paul. Like Paul, when he was Saul, in in the scriptures, it says he was
Pull those up,
described.
by the way.
Sure, I think I've got it in some notes.
Yeah, Trent, you're not gonna want to do that because you're on an iPad, and if you pull anything up or you go anywhere else, your iPad's gonna shut down. Like, for example, we can't see you now.
You can't see me now. That's very sad. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm back.
That's okay. Just go ahead and make your point, Trent. That's all good.
Yeah, if you want, I can pull them up for you.
I mean, it's Acts 22. I'm just thinking about this. It's not like a big passage.
We all hate tech problems. I deal with them all the time.
I think it just talks about Paul being full of zeal for God when he was a persecutor of the Christians. So I think Paul was he was super smart, very well educated. He was actually kind of a philosopher, trained by Gamaliel. Tarsus was a Stoic university town. He shows excellent familiarity with Stoic sources and Greek philosophy sources generally. So I think he very clearly understood what the Christians were claiming before he was a Christian. And he's described as having great zeal for God, even when he was a persecutor of the Christians and was denying the divinity of Christ and certainly would have denied the Trinity. So to me, that's a clear counterexample to the inference pattern. If X does not believe that God is triune, then X is believing in a different God. Because Paul, after all, believed in, presumably, I mean,
so yeah, I get your point. I get your point here, Trent. So you're trying to argue that the words that he had a zeal for God somehow indicate that he's saying that those who willfully reject Jesus Christ are worshiping the same God. But if you were to take Paul's,
I think the worship part is key, because Romans 1 talks about they have a knowledge of God, but they did not honor him as God. I think the big issue comes down to, like, do Muslims and Christians worship the same God? No, because the God that we worship is triune. Muslims do not worship the triune God. They worship a different idea of God. And so, of course, they're not worshiping the same God as Christians.
Same words in other instances, referencing individuals and groups that do not worship the same God. He actually says that the sacrifices of pagans are sacrifices to demons. Elsewhere in the scripture, I mean, we can pull that up here, but I'm sure you're familiar with the passage there. In the Old Testament, it says the gods of the nations are actually demons. So, I mean, if you were to willfully reject God, willfully reject Jesus Christ as being divine, I mean, you're arguing that full of zeal for God somehow implies that he's actually worshiping the one true God in that instance in his willful rejection, which is later corrected when Christ appears to him in the desert and says, "Why are you persecuting me?" And then he accepts him. But you're to argue that somehow...
That's a good point. Yeah, when Jesus appears to Saul, he says, "Why are you persecuting me?" Not, "Why are you worshiping me just with not according to the right knowledge of me?" Like, yeah, they're clearly not worshiping the same God because they're not worshiping God.
In opposition of all of his other statements, shows that he's worshiping the one true God even when he's in opposition. I would say that's contradictory to the rest of his statements.
So in a logic class, which I've taught for 25 years probably, that would be called the fallacy of the complex question. It's kind of like, have you stopped beating your wife? If you say yes, then it implies that you did, and if you say no, it implies that you still are. So I reject the notion that Paul makes any statements opposed to that or contradictory to that in any way, because after all, Paul's statements that people worship demons is totally consistent with the fact that they also worship the one true God. After all, we have examples of this in the Old Testament where the Israelites who worship the one true God at times also, unfortunately, added worship of false gods that are in many cases demons. So there's another logical non sequitur. So the second non sequitur that you've given is X. Nope. Let me finish. The second non sequitur is that if X worships demons, then X does not also worship the one true God. That is a known non sequitur. It doesn't follow.
In order to hold to your position, you would have to hold that people worship demons and God simultaneously, but you cannot have two masters according to the scripture. So you just disprove yourself.
Not masters. But
well, if you're worshiping something, do you make that your master?
No.
Okay, can you prove that to me via the scripture?
Well, like for instance,
you can
a lot of
pull up the dictionary. I just say you pull up the dictionary.
Well, there are people, for instance, my wife and her family, we offered, when we went to China, we offered worship to her ancestors, right? But my wife would never say that, they have a shrine and we poured, his favorite beer, her grandfather's favorite beer all over his grave. It was a kind of worship, but they would never say that the ancestors are, or the...
Yeah, Danny, just real quick, just for some clarification here, just so we don't miss each other. The type of worship that you give a deity is not the same worship you would give your aunt. So what Ben here is saying very clearly is that if you're worshiping a demon, right, it's not like you worshiping your aunt. Therefore, if you're worshiping a demon in place of God, you're not worshiping the true God, you're worshiping a demon.
Wait, are y'all suggesting that you can't worship multiple things at once?
Well,
you can't serve two masters. I mean, you're either worshiping the one.
I like Ben. I cleave to antiquity. I don't really know what he's getting at here. I think there is an aspect in which you can worship multiple things at once. I don't think that necessarily means that they're your master. But it is clear from the first commandment that we should have no other gods before him. So we really should only be worshiping the true God. So I'm not terribly sure where he's going with this.
True God, or you're worshiping demons. You can't worship both at the same time.
So your position is that you can't worship multiple things at once.
Not in the true sense, no. There's one true God. So you can't worship a false God and the one true God at the same time.
Now, Danny, let me be very clear.
The Israelites actually did that.
Well, let me respond to Daniel.
Well, you can say from a material sense, but in the actual sense, no, absolutely not.
What
When they're
are these
worshiping the golden calf,
It's
for
not
instance,
pure
would you say that they're worshiping the one true God at the golden calf? What did God say in response to them there?
He rebuked them because they shall be no other gods before me, which is in fact an affirmation that they were putting up gods next to God and worshiping them at the same time. And God.
Well, would you say that
doesn't
there's
want
actually
any
more
other
than one
gods.
God, though, Trent? Would you say there's actually more than one God, though?
No.
Yeah,
That's
there's one true God,
That's
and
my
there's
point.
demons.
That's right. And
we
there's
return
So
to
flowers and trees
when they're
and
worshiping a
reindeer.
demon in the form of an idol at the golden calf, are they worshiping the one true God in that instance?
in that exact instance. Let's are you worshiping God? Let's say are you married?
Well, just answer the one question there. If they're worshiping the golden calf.
I'm not going to answer a gotcha question.
Well, because you know what defeats your position.
No, because I'm
So Nehemiah does say that they worshipped God through the golden calf, but that worship was not accepted because it was idolatry. Kind of confused, Ben.
too good for that. Are you worshiping God right now?
You're too good to answer the question about worshiping the golden calf.
I'm too good to be tricked. I'm too good to be tricked.
To be tricked.
What, Trent? What are you doing?
This is your own.
Yeah.
This is your own position.
When you're eating a salad, and you're really focused on that salad, are you also worshiping God at that moment?
When I'm in the act of worship, I'm either worshiping the one true God or I'm not.
Why?
I'm either worshiping the one true God or I'm worshiping a demon. So, like for instance, in the example that I brought up that you refused to answer with the golden calf, they're not worshiping the one true God.
Let's reset. There's a reason why Trent brought up Acts 22. You made an inference that if you don't understand God as triune, you're worshiping a different being. Acts 22 is a counterexample because Saul, who became Paul, did not understand God as triune. Yet Acts 22 affirms that he was worshiping God. Right? It's just a counterexample to your argument.
Well, that's your claim. He says, "I have zeal for God." You would have to hold that in isolation from all of the other statements that he makes that says that if you reject Christ as divine, you're not worshiping the same God. You're not worshiping God at all. Actually,
does Acts 22
in the Bible. The Bible actually, Danny, very specifically says that if you reject Christ, you don't have God as your father. Let's
just focus on Acts 22, 1-5. Does Acts 22, 1-5 affirm that Saul does in fact have zeal for the one true God?
Right. And if you were to take it the way that you're taking it out of context, in rejecting all of his other statements, no, that's not what it's implying.
I mean, it's just there is no implication. It's just a sentence. He was filled with zeal for God, and that's true, right?
Is that a false statement, Cleve?
That he was filled with zeal for God? Correct. Yeah, I mean, he feels that he is.
Well, again, I think this is just the tying into that Romans 1. It's zeal for God. It's knowledge of God, but it's not actual worship because you've got so much wrong about Him.
Worshiping God, right? Everybody feels like they're worshiping. Everybody in any system is going to claim that they're worshiping the same God or the one true God.
The scriptures don't say that he felt that way. Do you think Paul was mistaken? Can we put the scripture back up there again?
You added the word feel.
Do you think that he contradicts himself in Romans 1, where he specifically states that those that are worshiping other gods are not actually worshiping God?
It's more likely that you're misinterpreting those verses.
That's right. I believe
I would say if you're taking one verse and making your entire theology off of your misrepresentation of this one verse, then you're probably wrong about it. Especially if you're unwilling to look at the other instances in which he says the exact opposite of what you're trying to impute onto him here.
Let's go one by one.
I would have not anticipated that the Christian would twist scripture. You added the word feel. Is the word feel in Acts 1 through 22, 1-5? Is the word feel in there?
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
You said that he felt like he had zeal. You added the scripture.
Let me say something real quick, Danny, because I think we're getting a little out of hand here. So let me bring some clarity here.
Good job, JP.
The scripture clearly says that Paul was a Jew. Okay? So we do know that Jews had some revelation of the true God because God did reveal himself to the Jews. Now, the issue at hand is going to become when you say Muslims have the same God, because we can say that Jews, specifically in the Old Testament, and even in the New Testament, when they're talked about, there is some level of revelation that they had, because in the Old Testament and in the New Testament, it is known that God revealed himself to the Jews. Where it gets difficult, and I'm going to let you cook in a moment, Trent, where it gets difficult and complicated and where we cannot say anything regarding that is with Muslims, because Yahweh never revealed himself to Muslims in the way that he revealed himself to Jews. Therefore,
I would add to that, he did reveal himself as triune in the New Testament. So after that, you can't say that Jews today are worshiping the same God as Christians, because again, Jesus says, "If you do not have me, you do not have the Father either."
I would say Muslims have another God.
Do me a favor, JP. Do me a favor, JP. Can you pull up Romans 1:21? And I want to read a couple of verses there.
Yeah, hold on.
Just so we can see the counter statement of Paul in the instance of those who are basically rejecting the one true God. They're rejecting Christ's divinity. No, pull up the full chapter, because I'm gonna read a couple of verses there.
This is the right
All
place
right.
to go to.
Starting from where?
21, please.
All right.
All right. What version do you have up? All right, that's fine. That's fine. That's fine. All right. For although they knew God, they neither glorified him as God nor gave thanks to him. So, for although they knew God, they neither glorified him as God nor gave thanks to him. But their thinking became futile, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Although they claimed to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the
Right, so they're not worshiping him. They may have an understanding of things about him, but they don't have him. They don't worship him.
Glory of the immortal God, or images to be made like a mortal human being and birds and animals and reptiles. This is the example of the golden calf, which you refused to answer earlier, Trent, and the other statements by Paul, specifically stating that if you reject Christ's divinity, if you reject the Trinity, if you reject who the one true God is, you're not actually worshiping the one true God. You're exchanging the truth for a lie. For although they knew God, they did not honor him as God.
What do you think those verses are supposed to show?
This proves the opposite of your point, Ben. You realize that, right? This is literally the opposite of your view.
So the opposite of my view, for although they knew God, they didn't honor him as God or give thanks to him, saying that they're not actually worshiping God.
So this does not mean that every single person who ever lived didn't worship God, because then it would apply to the Jews. So it doesn't apply to
Who's
everybody.
saying every single person who ever lived didn't worship God? What are you talking about?
Your argument depends on reading this as a universal generalization instead of a generic statement.
For those who reject the one true God, which, Trent, you're a Christian, right? Is your God Jesus Christ?
Jesus Christ is my personal Lord and Savior.
Okay. Is the Trinity your God as well?
God is triune.
Okay, so the Trinity is your God, Jesus is your God. If I were to take a Muslim and take him back to the crucifixion, let's say we hopped into a time machine, and I were to point up at Jesus Christ on the cross and ask him, is that your God? What do you think he would say to you?
It's utterly irrelevant what he would say. It's such a silly question.
Why is that irrelevant? You used, in your previous discussion, you used a Superman argument in which someone was confused about the identity of Superman. Lois maybe has his glasses on, he takes it off, or whatever the case may be.
Precisely to illustrate that somebody's misunderstandings of a person in no way block their ability to denote that person. You're literally getting everything backwards. So
if that is the case, Trent, and what I'm saying is if somebody willfully rejects God, Jesus Christ, who is my God, which is why I use the example of the man going to the time where Jesus Christ is on the cross, pointing up to Jesus and saying, is that your God? The entire reason I bring that to your attention is to show you that when you actually have God in front of you and you're rejecting who he is, you can no longer claim ignorance in that instance. Jesus Christ revealed himself to us. Islam is predicated on the rejection of Jesus Christ's divinity and the rejection of the Trinity. Therefore, they cannot be worshipped.
Yeah, if you aren't worshiping God, the God who came and revealed himself as Jesus Christ, you're not worshiping God. Like I don't know how it could be more clear than that. Jesus is God. You don't believe that Jesus is God. Therefore, you don't worship the same God as Christians. It's pretty simple.
The same God as us.
You know what else was predicated on that, Ben? Paul's zeal when he was Saul. Let's go back to that verse.
Do you think the Old Testament Jews did not worship the Trinity in type?
Why are you so avoidant of addressing this Pauline issue? Why is this such a threat?
What do you mean? I've literally just addressed it. I've read other citations from Paul showing that you're misinterpreting the text.
I want to analyze.
He's not making a statement to say that if you reject Jesus, you're still worshiping the same God. Is that what you think Paul is saying here?
Well, I want to analyze your inference, right? Are you saying that if someone misdescribes something that you believe in, that therefore they can't be talking about the same thing? Is that your?
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying if you reject.
It's not just a matter of misdescription. It's a matter of like who he is as God, as a being, triune, and also the person of Jesus Christ. If you're denying that the person of Christ is God, the God you worship is a different person than the true God of Scripture. It's not just a mere description. It's ontological.
To someone, then it doesn't follow. So then it doesn't follow. So then it doesn't follow. So then it doesn't follow that if someone thinks your God is not triune, it doesn't follow. Therefore, they're talking about something different.
Well, the Trinity is not a description of God; it's who God is.
Triune is a description.
Exactly.
Right.
Being.
The Trinity is who God is.
Okay, but if I say, or rather, if a Muslim says God is not triune, so then you would agree that they could be talking about the same thing you are when you say God is triune.
If you're talking about Jesus Christ, who is divine, you're talking about the Trinity. You reject those two things.
Yes or no
you're not worshiping the same God.
It's a yes or no question. Do you remember? I'll repeat the question. So if you agree with me, okay.
So Danny is he's talking about God as though God was just simply an idea. But because God is a being and God has revealed himself as triune and revealed himself in the person of Christ, when the Muslim says God is not triune, their idea of God does not comport with the reality of who God is. And so their idea of God is not the true God. It's a different God.
Danny, it doesn't follow that if you're misdescribing something, that therefore you're not talking about something different, right? Then you would agree that
that doesn't follow that just because they think they have the same referent that they're actually referring to the same person.
That's not what he said. That's not what he said.
So let's go over it again.
You're saying that they can have like maybe descriptions or something wrong. The Trinity's not a description.
No, you're not getting it. You're not getting it. So let me repeat it, right? We agree then that if a Muslim says, "Oh, God is not triune," that's not a sufficient condition for thinking that they're referring to something different when they're talking about God. We agree, right?
No.
Yeah. Can I say something real quick?
That's an important question, though.
It is an important question, but let me add to that. I think it's important to realize the scenarios, right? If you have somebody in a forest somewhere that doesn't know any better, they grew up in a cave and they don't know any better, perhaps there could be some grace. But if there's somebody that rejects the true and living God, and they have another God described in their book. You see, the Bible tells us what God is and what God is not. So if their description is what God says, or what I would say what the Bible says God is not, then I would say that's a different deity. The Trinity is a component, but I would say that if their God is not a father and the God of the Bible is a father, I would say that that is an example of two different.
Okay,
well,
so
this is
Paul, when he was persecuting the Christians, when Paul was persecuting the Christians, the zeal that he had for God was the zeal for the one true God, correct?
Is that the only argument you have, Trent? Because every other verse in which he talks about people who reject Jesus Christ's divinity, he says you're not worshiping the same God. You're actually worshiping a demon.
We can go through them one by one, bud. We can go through them one by one. But what's not going to happen with this guy is that you're going to push me off.
So do you just have one verse, Trent?
So
do you just have one verse to back your position?
One verse to start with, and I will go one by one, and every verse you want to go. But
so let me ask you a question.
Since you're not going to push me off square one. That's not going to happen.
Trent,
true or false?
Let me ask you a question.
Zeal.
No, your interpretation of that verse is incorrect. I've already proven that with Romans 1.
That's a yes or no question. Was Paul's zeal in that?
I'm not going to get trapped in words with your nonsense, Trent.
Okay.
No, your interpretation of that verse is incorrect.
Everybody listening.
Look, this is the thing.
The simplest verse, and you can't even talk about it.
You literally refused to answer my question about the golden calf because you know it's a defeater for your position.
No, because you have a you are.
Are you able to answer it, or are you just trying to run from every question that I pose?
No. What I'm saying
because I answered your question already. You just want to go back to it and beat the dead horse.
And then I'll answer your question. But we're going to start with mine.
I already answered your question, Trent. I already answered it with Romans 1, which actually
My question is a yes or no question.
Which actually lists the ramifications for holding your type of theology, Trent.
Yes or no question. Yes or no.
Look, I'm saying your interpretation of that verse is incorrect.
No, I didn't mention anything about interpretation. I'm just asking you: was Paul's zeal in that verse for the one true God?
Trent, he is not.
So was Paul's zeal for the one true God? I think what Ben is trying to get at here is that Paul's zeal is for the idea of God abstractly, but it's not necessarily his zeal for the true God ontologically, the being of God, who God is. He did not know who God was in a relational sense. He did not worship the true God, even though he had zeal for God. The Greek word is theos, and that word is used in Greek literature of speaking of Zeus, and as Paul brought up, or as Ben brought up in the other passages, that Zeus was being worshipped, but Zeus is a demon. So it's not so much the person of God or the being of God that's being referred to here in Acts 22. It's the idea of God, I think, is what Paul is getting at. He had zeal for God abstractly, but it was not according to the way that God had revealed himself. So it was not. It's not worship.
Saying that if you reject God, if you reject Jesus Christ as God, that you're worshiping the one true God.
Cleve, why are
your conclusion is false.
Cleve, you didn't answer my yes or no question. You're not answering Trent.
Look, I've already answered that by showing that you're taking.
Sorry, did you answer yes or no? Did you answer yes or no?
This is the thing. Let me speak. If you were to actually look through Romans 1, it actually lists the ramifications for holding your type of theology, Trent.
What does that have to do with his yes or no question?
Are you aware of that? Because it actually refutes your position.
Are you aware it's a yes or no question?
Yeah, I'm aware it's a yes or no question.
So why won't you answer it yes or no?
Because your question is based off of a false premise.
What is this question? Are you listening?
But yours isn't?
You're saying did he actually have true zeal for God? I'm saying that in his Jewish belief, right? Everybody has a belief. If you are in a religion, you think you're worshiping the one true God. So he's saying, I have zeal for God in that instance. Now he's in a transitionary period from the Old Testament Jewish faith in which he's persecuting Jesus Christ. But guess what happens when Jesus actually reveals himself to him? He submits himself to him. He submits himself to Jesus Christ. Yeah. Which guess what? In your Superman analogy that you were using earlier, Clark Kent takes off the glasses. If Lois were to actually say, you know what? Actually, I'm not referring to that same Superman. I'm actually talking about Bizarro. It would be evident that she's not referring to the same person, which is the case with the Muslims.
Except that Paul didn't do that. So let's stick with Paul and Paul's zeal.
Except that Paul didn't do that when he saw Jesus Christ reveal himself in front of him. He submitted to him because Jesus Christ revealed himself to be God.
Because the submitting to God, that's the worship. So we do not believe that Christians and Muslims worship the same God, because the idea of God that the Muslims have is different from the true God. They submit themselves to a false understanding of God. They submit themselves to a false being. They submit themselves to a demon. They don't submit themselves to the true God.
So here's the difference. I think Danny and I.
So you're saying that in his ignorance of his divinity, in his ignorance of Jesus Christ's divinity, that he's stating that he's worshiping the one true God, or that he has zeal for God, right? Rather, which is the actual word that he's saying. That when he actually reveals himself, it's not significant that he submits himself to him. Now Jesus Christ has revealed himself to man, but Muslims willfully reject him still today, even after his death and resurrection.
But that would
after he's revealed himself to him.
But that would only be relevant if you could not inadvertently worship what you have explicitly rejected, but we know that that's false.
So all right. So
we know that's
in
false.
Your previous.
The lowest.
Okay, well, that's an assertion. Prove your point.
Well, my assertion is based on all extant semantic theories of reference and the de dicto de re distinction that has been around for over 2,000 years, and the realization that you can sometimes have false beliefs about something and still latch onto that thing. I mean, Lois.
Sure, it's false beliefs, but you can't reject who he is ontologically.
Why think that? Why do you think that? I think that's false. I think what you're saying is false. Try to say.
Oh, I just showed you with the Bizarro example, Trent.
No. Let me give an example that would clarify. Look, there's a parable, I think, about the elephant and the blind men, right? So you get a bunch of blind men, you tell them all that you're going to be, touching an object, and you have to identify what it is, and they all touched it, various parts.
Right, and so this is the pluralism stuff, and I'm not surprised that Danny's bringing this up because he's not a Christian, he's an atheist. He's probably getting along the idea that all religions are fundamentally the same in some capacity, all are seeking after God in some way, and everybody's grasping after an elephant. Some's like they see the trunk, and so that's what they focus on. Some are feeling the legs or whatever. This kind of pluralism is not biblical. This is not biblical Christianity. This understanding is entirely philosophical, and I'm not surprised that it's coming from Danny. But if Trent is going to echo the same kind of sentiment, I think that's a huge problem, because that is clearly out of step with Catholic religion and Christian religion, though it is in line with Vatican II and the Catholic Catechism, which I think disproves the infallibility of the Church.
The elephant. One touches the legs. They think that it's a tree what they're touching. The other one touches the tusk, and they think it's like a spear or something, right? When they give their descriptions about what it is, they're talking about the same thing, but they have radically wrong and mutually exclusive descriptions, right?
So, radically disagreeing.
Right, and that's what, if Christianity is true, that's what the Muslims have done, right? They've picked up on Christianity and Jewish talk about God, and then they've come up with their descriptions about the thing that Muslims and Christians are.
That's actually a really good example, Danny. Because at the beginning, I don't know if you remember, we were talking about willful rejection versus ignorance. So if you're ignorant, you can be referring to the one true God, or you can ignorantly be referring to the one true God. But when it's when you willfully reject something that has been revealed to you, you're no longer talking about the same thing.
Wait,
in the same example, can I provide an example?
My example. If you tell them it's an elephant, and they say no, it's a tree, they're still talking about the same thing.
Yeah, if they're ignorant.
Willfully denying.
But if
they're willfully.
If they're ignorant of it.
So they're not talking about the same thing. It's not just if you tell them that it's an elephant. If the elephant, who is, for this example, is God, and the elephant fully reveals himself, and you deny it, and you still say, no, it's a spear, or no, it's a tree, you now understand this is a different entity altogether. This is a different being. This is not God.
Okay, so you would say, I'm not blind.
So Trent, you would say that somebody who willfully rejects Jesus obstinately is still worshiping the same God as you.
Just like in the elephant case.
Sure. If they've come to latch on to God.
So what's the limit then? So you said in your previous debate, you said Zoroastrians worship the same God, right? You said Muslims worship the same God.
I said it's possible if they could. I said it's possible if they could.
Okay, but if they're aware of Jesus and they reject them, right? Mm-hmm. Let's say Zoroastrians. You said Zoroastrians worship the same God. You said it's possible in some sense. Right. Muslims worship the same God. Where's the line? What's the line of delineation?
There isn't one. And standard textbook examples show.
So then everybody's worshiping the same God then?
No, that doesn't follow. See, you keep the problem with. So I don't know if you're familiar with Jordan Peterson.
Well, why don't you?
Jordan Peterson did this interview with this woman who kept saying,
"What is your criterion?"
Oh, so you're saying, and that's what I feel
like. Well, Trent, what is your criterion to say that somebody's worshiping the same God or not?
The criterion in the case of Muslims. The criterion in the case of Muslims is
just for any religion, not just Muslims, for any religion. What's the bare minimum criterion to be worshiping the same God, or is it just subjective?
That's a false dilemma. You are a veritable banquet of logical fallacies, my friend.
So you won't answer the question because you know it defeats your.
Notice there that the first real insult being thrown around is coming from Trent. Now, again, I've seen a clip or two online about Trent crashing out during this debate. I just want you to see that Trent was actually the first one to sling mud here. So when you see his crash out here in a little bit, I don't know, it's probably it's about halfway through, so maybe another 10-15 minutes it'll show up. Just remember, Trent's not innocent here. Trent's the one that started all this.
position yet again, and everybody here can see it, Trent.
To help with your question, let's take a case of pagans, right? Pagans might
Well,
worship.
no, can you answer the question?
I am answering the question, right?
No,
I'm talking to you, Buster, right? I'm talking to you, right? I'm talking to you. So let me get I'm going to address the question, and you're going to...
Notice he's running from the question.
I'm answering your
question. He has no standard.
I'm answering your question. I'm answering your question. You won't allow me.
Which is why he's teamed up with an atheist, because they have no objection.
Let me answer your question, right? And by the way, you did the same thing. You didn't answer yes or no when we demanded it. So I don't see why you have a problem with what I'm doing right now. So
well, actually, I did answer the question. I just didn't answer it in the way that you wanted.
It was like pulling teeth. Anyways, think about the pagans, people that worship Zeus. The reason why, when they're talking about Zeus, they're talking about a different entity than what Christians and Muslims and Jews are talking about, is because the sense of God there, the little g God, right, the concept doesn't imply anything like creator of all, have omni properties, right? It's like a humanoid being that has like, kind of more like Superman, right? So the idea is that when pagans are worshiping Zeus, they're saying, yeah, I'm not worshiping God in the sense that Christians and Muslims and Jews are worshiping, right? They're talking about little g God, okay? So that's the disanalogy between,
Okay, but see, Danny, here you're using description to differentiate between Zeus and the true God. You're talking about description of characteristics, not ontological differences, not the difference in being, not difference in personhood. You're just talking about descriptions here. So you're actually doing what you're accusing us of doing. So I hope you see that you're kind of the one stepping on it here.
If you're looking for a case where they're worshiping a different God than people that say this phrase, I worship the one true God in Christianity. Muslim
and the reality is there's a million ways that people come to God, but through Romans 1:20, it says that God's revealed himself in nature. So the reason why there is no direct answer to your question is because there's a million ways people can come to understand God. There is no finite set of options. But the most common way they come to latch onto God is through the heavens declare the glory of God, and they understand God as the creator of the world.
Of course, natural law does reveal the divine in a sense, but again, it can only get you so far. It can only get you to the idea of God, but it can't get you into a right relationship with the true God. It can't get you into actual worship.
And everything. And so when I was a kid and I watched cowboy and Indian movies, and the big chief would sit with the head of the cowboys, and he would say something with a good guy, right? With a good guy, and he would say, "Hey, the Great Spirit wants us all to come together as his children." It wasn't like I was going, "Oh my God, who is this person?"
Well, real quick,
notice how 1 second, JP.
The Great Spirit of the Indians is not the true God of Scripture. It is an idea created by the Indians. It is their best attempt. They're grasping at what God has revealed to come to him, but it's not the same being. It's made up. It's all the best that you can infer from natural human reasoning, but you need more than that in order to know the true God, in order to know him in a salvific sense that brings us to right worship.
Created nature, and therefore they were talking about the same God, because the phrase the only being who is the creator of the world is God. Do you know of another God? Are you aware of another God?
All right, so you're filibustering now. All right, let me speak. All right, so two things here. You're referring to natural theology, and all of your examples are referring to people who are ignorant, not those who willfully reject. So somebody out in nature, a person off on the island or whatever that doesn't have Jesus Christ revealed to them, right? That's who that would apply to, not somebody who willfully rejects. All right, so Danny, you actually answered Trent's question for him. So you said the creator of all, and what was it, omnipresent? Or what was the word that you used?
Things like omni properties.
Things like.
Okay.
Things like.
Okay, so creator of all, omni properties or something, right? So if those two, would you say that's like the bare minimum to say that you're worshiping the same God? Because that was the example you used, Danny.
Well, the point is that Muslims, Christians, and Jews think there's an entity that fits that description.
Okay, sure.
So if
I belong to a faith and I say that I'm worshiping the uncreated creator of the universe, he's omnipresent, he's omnipotent, whatever the case may be. But my iteration of worship of him, I believe he is a pink elephant with a unicorn horn. Would I still be worshiping the same God?
In the same way that, yes, and let me elaborate, yes, in the same way that the elephant example, they think it's a tree, they're still referring to the thing that's an elephant, even though it's nothing like a tree.
See, but this is the ridiculously of this system, though.
Wait,
so to say that you're worshiping the same God, if it is a example. Well, guess what? We have an example of this within the Scripture.
You won't talk about anything.
Real quick. Let me explain.
That's the golden calf.
Scared me a bit.
Yeah, let me explain something real quick. Let me explain.
So you just refuted your whole position.
All right, so real quick. So Danny mentioned an elephant here, so I quickly.
JP, I love it. You went to AI to make a image. This is fantastic.
Real quickly, ChatGPT an image real quick. You said, you know what?
Why is there that semi there though? That's funny.
real quick. Check this out.
To be fair, neither of these things are God. Just to be clear to the audience, no.
No, yes, but let's go with Danny's example. Suppose that these particular individuals think that this elephant is God, but the actual God is the truck, and they're all touching it, and they all have different perceptions of this elephant. Regardless of what perceptions you might have of this elephant is not this truck, and this truck is not this elephant. So if a Muslim is touching this elephant, and I show them the revelation of this truck, and I tell them, hey, Mr. Muslim's touching this elephant, the true God is this truck, not this elephant, doesn't matter how much they touch it, because the true God is the truck, not the elephant. So I would say that Hold on, let me finish. So I would say that now somebody said JP source is ChatGPT. Relax, fellas. I'm just using a picture from the thing. Relax. So all I'm saying is that Danny's example is contingent on that particular entity being the one true God that these particular Muslims worship, saying that it's the same one. But I'm saying the truck is the one true God that I worship, and Muslims not. So once I make them aware of the truck that I worship, that is different from the elephant. So that's what I'm saying.
Okay, it's a fundamental misunderstanding of the nature of the elephant example when it was originally brought up in the 40s and why Danny brought it up. The point of the elephant example was to...
I think it's interesting that the example was brought up for the first time in the 40s because for most of church history, we did not understand that Muslims and Christians worship the same God. We understood them as worshiping different beings.
Show that it is a non sequitur to go from two individuals are giving radically different descriptions of an entity to the inference that they are not in contact with the same entity. That is the reason why he brought it in there, to show that it is a counterexample to a general inference pattern, pattern that was required for his argument to work. Now, let me give you just two examples, okay?
No, before you give those two examples, let me address that. And then
I'm going to come back to the two examples, though.
Absolutely. I've been very charitable and fair.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I'm keeping track of every second here, guys.
That's all right. Give JP an opportunity to talk. He's barely talked during this whole thing.
Okay,
so.
Thank you.
Oh my
and
goodness.
I understand what Danny was trying to say. It's a very sincere argument, right? But from the Bible, we see a truck and we see an elephant, and that's what we're basing it on. In the Bible, we see an example of the true God, which is a truck. God forgive me for the blasphemous statements. God knows that's not what I mean, but Danny brought up the elephant. And we see the false God that is the elephant. So because we see in scriptures examples of one worshiping the true God and one not worshiping the true God, and I think Zeus was mentioned in all of these things in lowercase g, the Bible actually never says that is the true God once you are no longer ignorant of what you are serving. So once you no longer are ignorant, you are now aware of the true God. And last but not least, you keep mentioning Jews, and you keep mentioning that Jews have a knowledge of God and a zeal for God. I already told you that Jews are a different example from Muslims because God actually revealed himself to Jews. So they have a knowledge of godliness, but deny the power thereof. So therefore, it wouldn't be the case with Muslims where Yahweh never revealed himself. It was actually the devil who revealed himself to Muhammad in that cave. So that's where I would go. Go ahead. Give me your two examples. Go ahead.
I'd quibble with that just a bit because, again, the Jewish God, the Old Testament Jewish God, is the New Testament God, is Christ. God, the Son, is the God of the Old Testament. But it is true that the devil is the one that revealed himself to Muhammad.
Okay, but I'm going to reiterate that you all you guys are confusing the bare concept of worship as such with the enriched concept of perfect, whole, and flawless worship. Nobody's saying that Muslims perfectly, fully worship the one true God. I didn't say it. Did you say? Do you believe that, Danny? Danny, do you believe that Muslims were perfectly holy in the fullness? Right.
I never said that.
Nobody said that, and nobody said that you did say that, Trent. I don't know what you're getting at here.
Yeah, and that's not what Vatican says.
But all of the arguments depend on the inference pattern. If S is not worshiping X perfectly, S is not worshiping X. And that inference pattern has been shown to be false again and again and again. Now, let's talk about the denial thing. You talk about the difference between the Jews and the Muslims. That's why I specifically brought up Paul, because Paul most certainly was denying that Jesus was God, even though he was full of zeal for God. He was worshiping God in the ignorance that Jesus was, in fact, a divine member of the triune Godhead. Paul absolutely was denying that.
Was Paul a Jew?
Well,
Paul was a Jew.
Trent,
okay.
Let Trent finish his line of reasoning. Go ahead.
So that's why I didn't just coming back to the Jews. I'm coming back to the Jew, to a specific Jew who is a counterexample to the inference pattern. But let me tell you two stories about real people. Okay,
stories. We only have 20 minutes left.
You got plenty of time.
Go ahead, just keep it short, Trent.
Okay, you tell me how much time I can take, and I'll start my clock.
No.
20 minutes. There's 40 minutes left in this video. I'm sorry, JP, you didn't make it.
Go ahead, Trent. Just try to.
No. I want to know. Do I have 3 minutes? Can I talk uninterrupted for 3 minutes?
Sure, that's fine. Go ahead.
Okay, all right. I am a former Christian apologist. Maybe I'm still a Christian apologist. I don't know. I don't like that term anymore because I don't like what shows up when you search for that on the internet. But I was a big advocate of the two-step approach, okay, where you would give arguments for the existence of God to get somebody to theism, and then you would give arguments for the deity of Christ to get them across the border to full-fledged Christianity. Okay, that was what I was taught personally by Norman Geisler, who was my main first mentor. It's what Bill Craig has always done, J.P. Moreland, even Gary Habermas. All the people that taught me at Liberty University were all two-stage apologists. It was like, okay, first we hit...
Right, because you need to get to an understanding of an idea of God, but in order to worship the true God, you have to get past the idea into the personhood, the being, the relational nature of God, and that we worship him as triune in nature. Three persons in one God. We don't get to worship just simply by having an understanding of the philosophy around the idea of an uncreated creator. Aristotle did not worship the true God just because he had some understandings of what the true God would look like. He just didn't get there.
With the theistic arguments to show that there is a God, and then we hit you with the arguments for the resurrection of Jesus, so that Jesus is the full and complete revelation of that God. Okay. Now, there are a lot of people who, in the process of that, will say, okay, well, like Tony Kennedy at one point was like, okay, all right, fine, you've convinced me God exists, but I'm just not. This Trinity stuff is contradiction. It's too complex. And the idea that Jesus could be both God and man, that's a contradiction. That just can't happen. But you got me on God. You absolutely got me. And then you work on them some more. You really feed them the historical facts argument. And then they're like, oh, okay, it's coherent. Okay, fine. The incarnation, the Trinity, they're coherent, but I still don't think it's true. And then you're like, and you just keep, read this. And you're like, oh my God, it's actually true. And they come to believe Jesus. Okay, that person comes to believe that Jesus is the incarnation of the very God that they believed in from the theistic apologetics, even in the interim phase where they explicitly rejected the Trinity, rejected the incarnation, rejected the divinity of Christ. And this proves 1,000 times over that it is not the case that denying that Jesus is God, denying that God is triune, explicitly rejecting it makes you not a believer in the one true God. That is a proof 100 times over, 1,000 times over, maybe 10,000 times over for the individuals who actually did that. Okay, so I got 31 seconds left. I had students at Baylor University where I taught for a long time, and I taught honors freshmen, and they were intellectually very intelligent students, but so many of them believed it or not, believed that God was a physical being. They literally believed that God was a physical being, like the Godhead, not incarnate in Jesus. They had beliefs that absolutely contradicted the true nature of God, but they believed in the one true God. They absolutely did. And I got 3 seconds to spare. I'll yield the balance of my time.
There you go. Do you mind if I have a couple of minutes to respond to that? Same amount of time is fine.
Yeah.
You cool with that, Danny?
Trent is hilarious, man. Trent,
okay. Thank you again for coming and doing this debate with us. I really appreciate it. This has been a good conversation so far. So I'll respond to basically what you just said about about Paul's statement about his zeal for God. So in the time that you took to explain that, you actually, I don't know if you noticed that you said this, but in his ignorance of Jesus Christ's divinity, he was worshiping the true God. So that was actually something that you said in your response there. At the beginning of this debate, we conceded that if someone is ignorant of the one true God, right, they can in some sense be worshiping the true God. The same way that maybe an atheist who is like, God, show me a sign or something, can actually be calling out to God, even if prior to that they are willfully rejecting the Trinity or whatever. They're in that sense, they're softening their heart and they're saying, okay, maybe God is real. I'm going to call out to him in that sense. But in your example, you were discussing Paul being ignorant. Well, what happened shortly after that? He's no longer ignorant. Christ reveals himself to him. Similarly with the Superman argument, with Lois not understanding who, is this actually Superman or is this Clark Kent or whatever, that relies on her ignorance. But if he were to actually reveal himself to her, hey, this is me, this is Superman, I'm taking the glasses off, I'm putting the super suit on, this is me, I'm actually Superman, she was going to say, well, actually, no, the Superman I'm thinking of is actually that guy over there, and she points to Bizarro, we would know that they're not talking about the same individual. And I would also say that when I bring that up, so every other example within the scripture, so you bring up the one example with Paul, every other example of people who willfully reject God, it says that they're actually worshiping demons. And in the Romans 1 example that I brought that up very specifically because it explicitly states the exact opposite of what you're saying Paul states. So I'm going to read a little bit of a broader passage from Romans 1, and then I'll end my time here. So Romans 1:20, for since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power, divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made. So people are without excuse. They're without excuse for acknowledging that there is a creator because he's evident in nature. Okay, but, right, continuing on, for although they knew God, they neither glorified him as God, nor gave...
Right, evident in nature. That's what natural law can get you. It doesn't get you to worship of God. It doesn't get you to a true saving knowledge of God, but it gets you to an understanding of the idea of God.
Thanks to him. But their thinking became futile, and their foolish hearts were darkened. So referring to people who willfully reject God. So here are the actual ramifications for this type of theology if we continue on into the verses here. This is the ramifications, so pay attention to this, very important. Although they claimed to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images to look like a mortal human being in birds and animals and reptiles. Therefore, God gave them over in the sinful desires of their hearts to sexual impurity for the degrading of their bodies with one another. So where does this type of willful rejection of the one true God, that you can only worship God in one specific, like if you're not worshiping the true God, you're worshiping a demon. So what happens when you worship these demons? Well, guess what? God gives you over to sexual impurity. And I think we can actually see the fruits of this type of theology on display here today, since you have teamed up with a bisexual atheist to defend your theology.
That's a piece of shit. That's a piece of shit move, you fucking piece of shit. Fuck you. That is so disgusting. I cannot believe that I'm sitting here and I'm seeing somebody who claims to be a Christian treat another human being with such absolute disrespect. You should be absolutely ashamed of yourself.
He's mad because Ben said that he teamed up with a bisexual atheist. If you look right here, right under Danny's name, it says bisexual atheist. He's calling himself that. I mean, unless JP did it first, but what the heck?
Danny,
well, you're coming here to defend theology with an atheist
unchristian
that has his entire... and now he's crashing out.
God have
And now he's crashing out.
mercy on your soul.
Well,
God have mercy
Okay,
on your
and
soul.
now he's crashing.
What a
Okay.
bullshit move.
Well, we can piety
What a-
signal and all of this type of
what a
stuff,
bullshit
but I think
move.
that is the fruit of your theology. Ultimately, at the end of the day.
Let's go back.
All right. So, did Ben do an ad hominem attack here? I mean, maybe a little bit. Was it kind of fallacious? Maybe a little bit. I think part of it is for the lulz there. But he's also using it as an example. Like, you're saying the fruit of... He's saying that the fruit of this theology leads to this kind of sexual perversion that Danny is participating in. And Trent is defending the understanding of God that Muslims have, not in the sense of like... Well, I mean, he is defending that Muslims worship the same God that we do, just not in the full sense. And so Ben here is using that as an example of where that leads to. So in a sense, it's an ad hominem, but also it's not really. It's just taking it to its logical conclusion as laid out in the text itself. So I don't know. I see why Trent got so upset. I mean, he probably took it pretty personally. But when you start devolving into a shouting match like that, you've just demonstrated that you lost the debate. This is all that people are going to remember from this.
Your verse. I agree with Trent. That verse undermines your whole point. The people that were given over, do they know God? Yes or no, Cleve?
The people that were given over, do they give God? No, they don't worship God. Actually, it says that.
No, the question isn't about worship. I'm asking, do they know God according to this passage?
Oh, sure. Do they know God? Yeah,
Yes.
they did not see fit to acknowledge God, but
Right, now, do Muslims know God? Do Muslims know God?
Sure, but they reject him.
Okay, so
They know God in the sense of natural law. But the whole issue is, do Muslims and Christians have the same God? That's the title of this video. Having God means worshiping God. Possessing God, you have to, in order to possess God rightly, you actually have to worship him. If they don't worship him, they don't have him. Jesus says, if you do not have me, you do not have the Father either. So no, Muslims do not have the same God as Christians, even though they're able to understand correct things about the nature of God, but they don't get to the core of who he is. And so because of that, they have a different God.
they know God, but they reject him?
Absolutely.
What does that even mean? Right? Look, the point is that if they know God, then when they're talking about God, they're referring to the God
they know that Jesus Christ is. They know that Jesus. Oh, Trent's gone. Well, if you were to actually read the Quran, it actually admits that the Christians worship Jesus Christ as God. They reject this proposition.
Goodness.
The entire Islam religion itself.
It's so, I don't know how old this guy Trent is, but the way he acts here, it's so childish. The screaming and the yelling and the cursing and the leaving it reminds me of like the kid that's like, he brings the ball and everybody's playing with it and then they're mean to him and then he takes the ball and goes home so nobody can play with him. Like this, it's just so childish, so immature. Honestly, I don't know why this debate was happening, other than just for the clicks, for the views, which, that's why I'm doing this. So, sorry about that. I had a bit of a technical issue. Let's keep going.
Admits that the Christians worship Jesus Christ as God. They reject this proposition. The entire Islam religion itself is predicated on the rejection of Jesus Christ's divinity and the Trinity. So it says that in the Quran specifically. So if you were to read verse, hold on one second. If you were to read 21, for although they knew God, they neither glorified him, so they don't worship the same God. For although they knew God, they neither glorified him as God, nor gave thanks to him. That's the same exact instance.
This is not hard. Look, if you have a pagan that
this is not hard. That's the obvious reading of the text.
I let you finish. If you have a pagan that knows Zeus, or that believes in Zeus, do they know God?
If you have a pagan that
believes in Zeus, do they know God?
Well, according to your standard, right? No.
I'm asking
I would say in the example here given in Romans 1, yes, because God has revealed himself in nature. They know God in that sense, but they don't know God in the sense of the way that Christians do, not in the sense that we're actually talking about in this debate here.
your standard. If someone says they believe in Zeus, do they know God? Yes or no?
No.
No, because Zeus is a different entity than God. So now you said Muslims know God, right? That means that God.
I'm saying in the sense that they don't know the one true God. Now they would.
That means that the God they know.
Can I answer your question though, Danny? So they would say that they worship God, right? So in their own worldview, they would say that they worship God, but they don't worship the one true God. That's the way that I'm trying to tell you.
The point is that in the case where there would be different gods, that's the pagan case, right? To believe in Zeus is not to believe in God, okay? But if
Muslims are pagan, it's not Christianity. It's a heresy. They're heathens. This is not. I don't know where Danny's going with this.
You're agreeing with me, right? That Muslims believe in God and know God, and on your view, right? Know God on your view. Then they're referring to the God that when they bow down to, they're bowing to the God that they know. It's case closed for you.
So yeah, they're bowing down to the God that they know, but they're not bowing down to the one true God.
Oh, do they know the one true God?
Sure, and they reject him, Jesus Christ.
Okay, so when they say, I know God, and they bow down, I'm bowing down to the God that I know, is bowing down worship?
Is bowing down worship? Yeah, they're worshiping demons.
No, if they say
Okay, I think Ben is being a little bit unclear here. The text clearly says that they knew God, but though they knew him, they did not honor him as God, right? They did not glorify him. They did not worship him. They chose instead idols. So they know that God is because he's revealed himself through nature. They know a little bit about the character of God and they reject him. The God that the Muslims bow down to is a demon, which is what Ben is saying. But if we're talking about do they know the true God, they know him in the sense that he has revealed himself in nature, but they don't know him in the sense that he's revealed himself in Scripture. And that is the only one that saves you. That is the only understanding of God that can bring us into right relationship with him. That's the only understanding of God that can bring us into true worship of him. So the Muslims, they have an understanding of the true God, but the entity that they worship, the being that they worship, is Satan.
you already agreed.
Well, I mean, they can be wrong, though. In their mind, they think they're worshiping the one true God. They're not actually, though. The Quran actually specifically states that they don't worship Jesus Christ as God, and it condemns Christians for doing so.
Okay, are you saying that they're worshiping a different entity because they have a false set of descriptions about the one true God?
No, I'm saying they're worshiping a different...
It's not just a description. It is a matter of nature and being, a matter of the person of Christ. They're not just worshiping God with a different description than the Christians have. That's not how this works.
Entity in the same way that if, like in the Lois example, if you were to actually put the super suit on...
It would be like the Zeus example.
The Zeus example? Well, the Zeus example isn't the creator of the universe, though.
Right. So
he doesn't have the omni property, so even from your own perspective...
The point is that the point on your view, you're committed to saying that Allah is like Zeus, a different entity than the one true God.
You said is Allah... Repeat that one more time. I'm sorry,
yes.
Danny.
You're saying that you're committed to this, that if Muslims are worshiping a different entity, okay, then it would be like a pagan worshiping Zeus because Allah would be a different entity than the one true God.
Sure, because they willfully reject Jesus Christ.
Right.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That Allah, the Allah that Muslims worship is a different entity from the Christian God, just like Zeus is a different entity from the Christian God.
But then earlier you said Muslims, you agreed with me that Muslims believe or know God.
Yes, they know God, but that God that they know as he's revealed himself in nature, that is not Allah. That is a different entity.
Well, sure, they know because they know that Christians worship Jesus as God.
Right, so they're not like the pagan. They actually are bowing down to the one true God.
Sure, they're not like the pagan.
Sure, okay.
Actually, I would have the opposite though. I think you've got that kind of mixed up because the pagan, at least in antiquity, wouldn't have known about Jesus Christ as being divine. They wouldn't have known about the Trinity, etc. So you could argue maybe from ignorance that they worship God like as revealed in nature or whatever the case may be. But in the case of Muslims, it's actually doubly worse because in their text they actually reject Jesus Christ, the one true God, as being God. So they wouldn't have the same God as me.
Look, it's
the exact opposite of your example, Danny.
Yeah, let me address something real quick. Danny's name is literally bisexual atheist. Like, that's his name. So can you guys cut it out? Cut it out, please. Thank you. Carry on, fellas.
Well, I put that title for people like Cleve, who has been insulting me, and other Eastern Orthodox and Protestants have been insulting me on Twitter, saying that why is someone with this kind of sexuality even talking about the topic, right? It's just bigoted. Trent was a justified crash out because people like Cleve bully people like me for no good reason. But anyways, we'll move on. The idea is this.
Well, I mean, I wasn't intending to bully you. I'm just saying that's the logical conclusion to collaborate with individuals who are atheist and have your type of sexuality on these types of issues.
That is just an ad hominem.
Well, not when the scriptures specifically say that that's the end result of this type of theology.
What does that have to do with the debate? The point is that atheists have a view that, when people worship Zeus, that's a different god than when Christians worship.
Okay, well then let's get back to the debate, Danny.
Right. So I'm just pointing out that there's a bit of bigotry on your end, right? About an ad hominem about attacking my sexuality.
So we've got the piety signaling.
Right.
Let's
continue. You're the one that started it, though, right? Okay, but moving on. The point is that either Allah is more like the Zeus.
Honestly, this debate has been remarkably catty. Ben, I think you're doing a decent job at your composure. I think you knew what you were doing there with that, and I think Trent certainly overreacted. He's an elderly gentleman, at least as far as I'm concerned, because I'm a bit of a younger guy myself, and he should know better than to act like that. You don't get to just curse, flip people off, and leave. Like that was kind of pathetic. But I mean, Ben, you probably knew that was good. That was something that was going to happen, given his last debate with Jay Dyer.
Case or is worshiping the same God as you. Okay, if you're saying it's more like the Zeus case, they don't know God because people that believe in Zeus, that's the only, let's say, kind of deity they believe in, they don't know.
Okay, Paul is specifically referring to the Gentiles in Romans 1. So yes, the Gentiles in Romans 1 who worship Zeus, they do know God, and it is not Zeus.
God. Okay, so is Allah more like Zeus or more like the God that you worship?
is Allah more like Zeus or more like the God that I worship? It doesn't matter what he's more like if he's not the same person, if he's not the same being, right? So you're conflating attributes and ontology.
My question. And it's my fault because more like is ambiguous. Okay, what I'm asking is that is Allah a different entity than the true God, right? Like Zeus is a different entity than the true God. That's the question.
Yes.
Well, they're both different entities. So are you saying in terms of can I ask a clarification question, Danny? Is that all right? So are you referring to
the Muslim Allah is ontologically a different entity from the Christian triune God? It's pretty simple.
Like descriptors of the two? So I mean, I guess you could say in some sense, I don't know, Allah, the Islamic conception of Allah, at least the modern Islamic conception, because the old kind of like the origins, I don't know if you know about this, there's an argument that says that it's actually just a like updated version of Baal worship, and early Byzantine manuscripts actually state that like Allah was like a god made of like, what was it, beaten metal or something. And in these early Byzantine manuscripts, there's actually anathemas against the God of Islam, and they would make converts into the church proclaim an anathema over the God of Islam before being received into the church. So they would have to basically curse this false God of Islam because earlier manuscripts actually tie it into him being a god of beaten metal. So if we're referring to the modern iteration of Islam, it's basically, if you were to say, are they closer in terms of description? I mean, you could maybe add, he's the creator, it's not what you're, go ahead and clarify then, Danny. I'm sorry.
Okay, the context is that you admitted that Muslims do know God, right? And Allah is just
Jesus Christ, yeah. I'm not saying in their false religion has true worship of the God.
Okay, now it's not clear. Do Muslims know God, yes or no?
Yes, as Jesus Christ, but they reject him.
Okay.
See, I would say that they know God in the sense of natural law, that he's revealed himself in nature, they know him to that extent. But because they've rejected Christ, they refuse to honor him as God, and they worship a different entity. I think that's a better way to put that, Ben.
But we agree that Muslims know God, period. All right, so moving on. Allah is just a name for God, right?
No, not in their instance, because they have no other name for God.
What does Allah mean in Arabic?
Sure, yeah, but that's a word concept fallacy, Danny. That's not what they're referring to.
It's a question. How can it be a fallacy? Is Allah
because you cannot call Allah by any other name in Islam. They actually have a very specific intention when using those words. If you were to say like a Christian is using the word Allah, they have a different meaning behind the word.
What do Muslims mean by the term Allah?
So they're referring to their God, which has no son, cannot be called the father of any.
The point is that if it's just a synonym for God, then they're talking about perhaps.
Well, it's not just a synonym for God. That's kind of the modern understanding of the word, which is why I said it was a word concept fallacy.
I'm saying that Allah is like the word Dios. Okay, do you know what Dios means?
But it's not in the Islamic sense, though.
Why would anyone believe that?
No, that's quite literally their name for God, though. That is his
Dios,
name,
right?
No, not like just saying God in general.
How do you say God in Arabic?
Yeah, I understand. It's a word concept fallacy. You say Allah, that's fine, but that's a word concept fallacy.
First of all, when you say fallacy, remember, unless it's a loaded question, I can't be arguing fallaciously if I'm asking you a question, right? So the question is...
I think you are.
Yeah, I mean, but no, that's literally what you're trying to conflate, though. The two meanings are not the same.
I'm saying
they're not referring to just a general term like God. That's actually their name for God.
Okay, what's the general term?
And again, I mean, the Greeks use the word theos to refer to Zeus. And in the New Testament, that's the word to refer to God. It's because it's the idea that's being used here.
For God in Arabic.
The general term for God would be Allah, but if you're going to conflate the meanings to be the same thing, that's a word concept fallacy. It's not.
So
2 minutes, fellas, 2 minutes.
I'm talking about the generic. The point is that Muslims believe in the generic sense of the term God. Okay, they think that entity exists. Now it's either that they're referring to a completely different entity than you are, so it'd be like the Zeus case, in which case they don't know God. Okay, or they're referring to because they know.
That is not true. In which case, referring to Zeus, that does not mean they don't know God. They all do, but they're denying him and choosing to worship Zeus instead. The Muslims, they understand from natural law who God is to a certain extent, and they're denying him and choosing to worship their own conception of God. They're choosing to worship Satan that revealed himself to Muhammad.
They are referring to the God that you know as well. That's the dilemma.
Okay, so what is the question? Because my entire point was that if they reject Jesus Christ, they're rejecting the one true God.
It's a dilemma.
They might think they have understanding of, like, they might actually have understanding. When I say they have understanding of God or they know God, I'm referring to Jesus, because literally within the Quran, it's talking about Jesus. It talks about that Christians worship Jesus as God, and it actually condemns him for it. It says, I could actually pull up the, it might be, we don't have enough time for me to pull up the,
that's enough time. So fellas, look, check it out. So me and Danny are going to go head to head with you guys and ourselves in the next show, which will be in 45 minutes. But for now, we're going to answer the super chat questions. And as soon as we finish the super chat questions and the questions at hand, and just for the sake of time, I'll just let Danny and Cleve answer those questions. I'll just read them. So so I'm going to read the super chat questions, and then after we finish reading all the questions, we'll go to the after show, which is pinned in the live chat thing right there. It's pinned. And if you're a subscriber to the channel, I think you'll automatically be pushed over. So and the link will be provided if you guys want to take on Danny yourselves. Okay. All right. So real quickly, the first question is going to be. Well, this is not a question, but this is one of the.
Just pull up the questions.
Well, I would like to.
Let's.
I would like to respond.
Go ahead, Danny.
Right. The point is, I don't, and I think that I've hopefully convinced the two people on the panel. The point is that atheists have to have
The irony that Trent needs an atheist on his team. I mean, yeah, that was what Ben was getting at with that joke earlier.
If you're, the most of the world is religious. We have views about what we think religious people worship. We think that pagans worship different stuff than Christians. Okay, you don't need to be a Catholic or a Protestant or a religious person to have a view about this. Okay,
sure.
All right, cleave to antiquity. So what do you do with Balaam in Numbers that was pagan and worshipped multiple gods, of which the true God and was used by the true God to prophesy?
Sure. So when the true God was revealed to him, in that instance, he's following the teachings, or he's following the direction of the one true God. But in his worship of false gods, the scripture is actually very clear. If you read Deuteronomy, it says the gods of the nations are demons, very specifically. So even referencing Baal. So he would have to cease his worship of Baal in order to serve the one true God, which he actually does if you were to continue to read that particular text when he refuses to curse Israel as the commands of that pagan ruler wanted him to do. So good question, though.
All right, do you want to answer this,
He
Daniel?
didn't worship God.
No, go ahead. You go to the next one.
All right. All right, so I'm just going through the super chats, fellas.
Right.
So
I think we should probably read the super chats that they sent just to say thanks for sending them in.
I already made my point. I won't address the atheist.
Yeah, the only reason that I even bring up the atheist thing or anything like that is because I think that's logically where the theology leads. In his previous debate, he was saying something along the lines of like, even atheists in some sense worship the same God, so it would make sense that would logically lead to believe you can defend these things as if you're on the same team.
Well, by the way, there are atheists that disagree with me. They think that Muslims and Christians worship different gods. So just letting you know.
Sure. I mean, under the atheist kind of paradigm, especially if you're like a radical skeptic, there is no real objective truth. And
Yeah, I mean, atheism is not logical. The scripture teaches that the fool says in his heart there is no God. So atheism is on its face foolish.
I don't know if you remember, Danny. We've actually had a discussion in the past on TikTok, like maybe a year or two ago.
Okay, well that would be well that's a different topic. So yeah.
Yeah. We'll move on.
All right. So we have a couple of non-super chat questions. How much of the ship, God's self-revelation, can be replaced with one worship? All right, so I think that one's for you, Danny.
Again, so if you have an entity, let's say the ship of Theseus, and you think the ship of Theseus, or let's say you again, like the elephant example, you examine it with everything but your eyes. Okay, you could have everything wrong. All of your descriptions about the thing that you're touching could be wrong. And you'd still be referring to the same thing. So that's, I guess, the best way to answer this question is that how wrong can you be about the thing that you're referring to? You could be very, very wrong and still refer to it.
All right. Do you want to tackle this one, Cleve?
No, that's all right.
All right, cool. Somebody sent a super chat, but it wasn't a question, so we're not gonna, it has to be a super chat question, right? Danny, the Superman analogy shows that you can have the same referent. However, you have yet to prove that Allah is not a different being than Yahweh. Can you prove they are not different beings?
Yes, and well, by proof, I mean, can I show that it's reasonable? Here's why I think it's reasonable from at least my perspective, and I think most scholars' perspective. The point is that Islam, whether in a good way or a bad way, took from Christians and Jews, right? Muhammad conversed with Christians and Jews. He used their terms. He wanted to talk about what Christians and Jews were talking about. What the difference is that he presented a set of descriptions that were not the same set of descriptions that Christians and Jews were giving, but he was still referring to the same thing that they were talking about, right? Now, where evidence that I'm wrong would be this, that if Muhammad came up to Christians and Jews and say, hey, your God does not exist. Instead, my God exists. Okay, that is not what Muhammad did. And the early Muslims, right? They wanted to update, right, the revelation about the one true God that the Christians were wrong in their descriptions about.
All right. Okay.
Any other super chat questions? Send them in now.
Yeah. Danny, many religions have creator gods. Is it possible for a false deity to pose as the creator to steal worship, such as the Canaanite god El?
So, I don't... Okay, so I'll try to be brief. So there are cases where you have different reference under the same description, okay? So if I say that, let's say the creator, let's say that's a description, right? And I say that belongs to, let's say Jesus, but no, you say that belongs to Paul, right? You are talking about two different things, okay? But notice that if you think that description is like some kind of universal, you may not be disagreeing. Like in the case of Jesus, the Father, and the Holy Spirit are different persons, just like Jesus and Paul are different persons, but they have the same description, and you're referring to presumably different persons. So there are cases of that. The reason why I don't think that in the case of Islam is because of the Muhammad interactions with Muslims and Christians and Jews.
All right. So let's see here.
So I think Danny's a little bit confused here. The Canaanite god El was in Canaanite religion was the creator god in the same way that Allah is the creator god in Islam. I think that's what this individual, the sanctuary, is getting at with this super chat. And funny enough, Baal is actually the son of El in the Canaanite religion. None of that matters because all of that is just getting at the idea that this is a different entity, this is a different being. So when you get to the ontology of the differences between these beings, El is the creator god in the Canaanite religion. Yahweh, Jehovah, is the true creator god. They're different beings. They're not different names or different understandings of the same being, because God, the true God, condemned the worship of El in the Old Testament, the worship of Baal in the Old Testament. So yeah, the being of Allah in the Islamic religion is actually not the same being as Jehovah. Is not the same being that the Christians worship. It is Satan masquerading himself as an angel of light.
Do you want to tackle this, Cleaver? No.
Many religions have creator gods. Is it possible for a false deity to pose as the creator to steal worship, such as the Canaanite god El? Well, the entire principle is that if you willfully reject Jesus Christ, you willfully reject the Trinity, you're not worshiping the same God. If you're worshiping some kind of pagan god or something, your worship actually going to a demon. If you're actually referencing the Canaanite, pull up that previous super chat, JP. You said the Canaanite god or whatever. The gods. Let's just say the Canaanite like pantheon of gods or whatever. The Old Testament's actually very clear. The gods of the nations are demons. So.
New Testament's pretty clear on that too.
Danny, what's your thoughts on John 8:37-45?
Can you pull that up for me? Yeah. Okay, that was that's Romans, yeah.
Oops.
John 6. He either wanted to talk about Calvinism or he wanted to talk about the Eucharist.
37?
See, 37-45.
Okay, I know that you are. Can I read from 36? Maybe so. So if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed. I know that you are offering of Abraham, yet you seek to kill me because my words find no place in you. I speak of what I've seen in my father, and you do what you have heard from your father. Maybe one of y'all can tell me what the point here is, like how that would undermine my position. What is it? What's the problem here for me?
Oh, I think he's saying because it's saying if you reject the Son, then you have the devil as your father. So I guess he's asking, like, if you're going to do an internal critique of Christian theology, because from your perspective, you could just say basically anything. But under the Christian paradigm, would this not like refute your position if you no longer have God as your father, but you have the devil as your father? I guess that's the question.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, it could be that the way I would interpret this verse, and I could be, I'm not a Bible person and fundamentally, but the way I would interpret this verse is that if there are certain ways if you describe God, right, that has implications on how that God thinks about you or how his relationship to you, right? So if someone described me as stupid or not a human or something like that, that has implications about how I'm going to see them in my relationship with them. But they're still referring to me. But maybe someone could convince me otherwise that that's a problem for me or not.
All right, this one's for you. What about Christian fathers who say Muslims worship demons? It would make sense that Muslims will want to claim we have the same God if he is true.
Well, they're not mutually exclusive. It could be that Muslims worship demons and God, right? Just like actually the Islamic perspective, I wish we got a Muslim here. The Islamic perspective is that, at least how I understand certain Muslims to be saying, is that...
That'd be interesting. A Muslim, an atheist, and a Catholic.
So the way I understand Muslims is that they agree that Christians and Muslims worship the same God, but they think that you also worship other entities like Jesus. So they think you're not only worshiping God, but you worship Jesus. So there are two entities that are being worshipped according to Muslims. It could be that, and so the Christian perspective...
Right, so Islam teaches then that Jesus is a different entity. But if Christians say that Allah is a different entity, then you throw a red flag. Like, that's kind of an inconsistency there, Danny.
Might be similar, right? Okay, yeah, Muslims are worshiping the true God, but they're also worshiping demons.
All right, thank you for that. Do you want to take a bite out of that, brother?
Yeah, sure. So, actually, if you were to read, I brought this up earlier in the debate, but if you were to read the Byzantine manuscripts from early Christians, it's actually very clear that they did not believe that Muslims had the same God as Christians. In fact, they were actually commanded to anathematize the God of Islam before they were received into the church. So I think that pretty clearly refutes the proposition that the early Christians believed that Muslims had the same God. Also, that they thought that the God was a...
Yeah, the early Christians didn't. It's not until really Vatican II.
demon, because that's literally what the Byzantine manuscript states.
All right. Well, I think we can wrap it up there. Thank you guys for the support. There's no super chats there, so that's it. So God bless you guys. Just wanted to let you guys know that we're going to be coming here. So do Muslims have the same God as Christians? Open panel. Obviously, that's Danny right there. Yes, no. This is an opportunity for individuals who will want to address Danny or myself to come up, and don't be a keyboard warrior. You feel me? Like, don't be a keyboard warrior. If you're an Orthodox, you have an issue with Danny, pull up. If you're a Catholic, Protestant, whatever the case, pull up. If you have an issue with me, pull up. So there you have it. Now, we do have a couple of more super chats. Hindus worship Krishna. By the way, the link is going to be pinned. But if Hindus worship Krishna but indirectly goes to demons, why can Muslims worship Allah and indirectly go to the one? Why can't Muslims worship Allah and indirectly go to the one true God? If indirect worship is possible at all, then it goes both ways. So I think that's directed at both of you guys. I have no idea. Could go both ways.
I hope I understood the question. Again, my view is that it's certainly possible that Muslims or Christians are worshiping under, if Christianity were true or if Islam were true, there might be ways in which they're worshiping multiple entities without realizing it.
All right. You want to address this, Cleve?
I mean, it's just a repeat of my previous statement that you can't have two masters, right? So you're not worshiping two deities at the same time. There's only one true God. The rest are demons. So if you are worshiping a false god, you're worshiping a demon. It's as simple as that. If you're referring to like Hindus, some individuals, if you're worshiping Hindus, I guess it depends. Or if you're worshiping Hindus, if you're a Hindu and you're worshiping Krishna, I guess it depends on what type of Hindu you are. Because I know there's certain types of Hindus that are like monotheistic, and there's some that actually have like a multiple gods or whatever the case may be. But if you're like the monotheistic type, I would say in both instances, no, you're still not worshiping the one true God. Even if you were to compare like the ones that claim to be monotheistic, if you were to compare like a Brahmin, I mean, even under your example, Danny, you brought up 2 points. You said like omni properties or whatever the case may be, and then also was the creator of the entire universe. Well, he's not like he's got some deficiencies. If you were to actually read the text, like he gets distracted and like he's like, oops, I got distracted, demons ran out of my thigh type deal. So I think you would have some issues even under that type of framework, claiming that they worship the same God. But I don't know. Do you want to respond to that?
I want to comment on something earlier that was said. So imagine, like the Bible talks about, false prophets, maybe even people that, I mean, this happened before, where people say, hey, I'm Jesus, I've come back, right? And let's just say someone has been convinced by that. Like they were a Christian, but, or at least, they maybe I don't know what you think about whether this is possible. It's certainly possible in my view that they were Christian and then they were deceived by someone into thinking that they were Jesus, right? So then they worship the person, the false Jesus, right? So when they bow down to that person, I think there's a sense in which they're worshiping two different entities. They're trying to worship the one true God, right? Which is not that person, but they're also worshiping the person right in front of them. But maybe someone, maybe I could be convinced that that's not the right way to look at it. But that's a case where, I think that's how Muslims sort of see Christians, right? That while Christians worship the same God, right? When they bow to Jesus, they're worshiping something different than the true God.
All right. Well, thank you for that answer, Danny. There's two more. Now, I know this is going to sound very weird, and no YouTube probably have said this before, but no more super chats. I appreciate the support, but we got to start wrapping up. So I thank you, thank you guys for your blessings. All right. Oh yes, Cleve, you have to answer this one. So Cleve, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Is it your assertion that Balaam turned from false gods or demons to worship the one true God? I mean, it doesn't say that he made a full conversion. He acknowledged God, but then later on didn't serve him faithfully, and actually ends up. I mean, I'm sure you've read, but he didn't end up serving him faithfully towards the end. But maybe
he rejected God. Peter uses him as an example of someone who does not worship the true God. So, yeah, Balaam did not turn to the true God.
Be a nuanced question. It's a bit different to judge an individual than you would judge like the entire religion that is predicated on the rejection. Like I can't see inside of his heart, and the scripture doesn't make it explicitly clear enough for me to answer that directly. But I appreciate the question, because there's a difference between like an individual, like I could say maybe like an individual Muslim that is completely ignorant of what the religion teaches and is completely ignorant of Jesus Christ's divinity or the Trinity or anything like that. Like, and she's like, God, are you out there? Do you hear me? You can make an argument that that individual is actually worshiping the one true God. But when you're talking about the religion in and of itself, I mean, the entire religion is predicated upon the rejection of Jesus Christ's divinity and the Trinity. So it'd be a little bit different there.
Let me answer this one real quickly, and then
I think it's the same with the Mormons. Honestly, the Mormons have an idea of God. They have an idea of Him as a creator, but it's not the same God. It's not the same Jesus. Their religion is fundamentally different from ours, and so therefore the God that they worship is fundamentally different as well. Religion is not just simply descriptive characteristics or our best attempt at describing God. True religion is revealed by God. So to say that Christians and Muslims and now Mormons worship the same God is just not true.
We'll wrap up. So this one is for anyone. Does the fact that Allah reveals Himself in the Quran and it is not the God of the Bible matter? In short, yes, I think it matters. I think Danny would say probably wouldn't matter, but in short.
But if that's true, then I would be wrong, right? Because my position is that the Quran is a set of descriptions of what the Bible is attempting to refer to. But so if that were true, then I would be wrong. But so I'd actually agree with the statement. But yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for that, Cleve. If there's anything you want to add or take away, maybe closing statements or something, you guys can do that. Again, the link to the after show will be pinned, and the link to join that after show will be pinned in the comment section of that after show. So,
JP, can you give me? I need to get something to drink, go to the bathroom. Can you add like 10 minutes? Maybe like a 10 minute.
Yeah, I could do that, and what I could also do is I'll just open it up and wait for you, brother. So,
all right. Well, I think that kind of wraps it up here. I don't want to drag on while they're doing their closing little bits there. I mean, the debate ended. That's really all there is to it, I guess. I think Ben did a pretty good job. A couple of points I would have disagreed with him on. JP, same thing. I think he did a good job. A couple of things I would have disagreed with him on. Danny, I was actually kind of surprised. Did a pretty good job representing his position. I think he's fundamentally wrong and mistaken. But I think he truly believes what he was saying. Trent just crashed out and got really angry and yelled and screamed. For someone who claims to be full of logic and such a logical man, I mean, he says he was a logic teacher in school. I think he just did not control himself, did not conduct himself properly. So yeah, I think winner, if I had to pick, would be Ben and JP. mainly because they're right. I think their position is correct, but also I just don't think any of the assertions that the opposite side made held any ground. I think when Ben answered the questions from Danny and from Trent, I think he did a good job of refuting their understanding. And I think ultimately the answer of the question of do Muslims and Christians have the same God is just simply no. The triune God of Scripture is a fundamentally different being from the God of Islam. The God of Islam is Satan disguising himself, pretending to be God, and he's duped a lot of people, including the Roman Catholic Church, to say that he's the same. So yeah, if you guys liked this, comment, subscribe, like. Let me know if you want me to keep doing stuff like this. I'm pretty new to all this stuff. I don't really know how it goes. The tech problems are really tough for me, and then also just trying to, I'm just trying to get my channel started. And so yeah, any help you guys can give me would be great. Leave me a comment. Let me know if there's anything you want me to cover in the future. If there's anything you didn't like about this video, anything I need to do different. Any feedback is appreciated. Anyway, God bless. Take care, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.